Imagine discovering that your pursuit of the perfect woman is actually making you lose yourself completely. That every time you think you found her, you're not falling in love. You're falling into a psychological trap that Carl Jung warned us about over a century ago. That the very thing you believe will complete you is systematically erasing who you really are. If this video resonates with you, please hit that subscribe button and give it a like. Your support helps me continue exploring these deep psychological truths that can genuinely transform your life. Carl Jung spent decades studying the human psyche, and one of his most disturbing discoveries was how men lose themselves in the presence of what they perceive as feminine perfection. He called it anima possession, and it's happening to millions of men right now without them even realizing it. You might be one of them. Here's what Jung discovered. Every man carries within his unconscious a feminine aspect called the anima. This isn't just psychological theory. This is the blueprint for how you relate to women and to the feminine qualities within yourself. Your anima represents everything you feel you lack: emotional depth, intuitive wisdom, creative inspiration, spiritual connection. It's the missing piece of your psychological puzzle. But here's where it gets dangerous. When you encounter a woman who seems to embody your anima perfectly, something catastrophic happens in your psyche. You don't just fall in love, you fall into a state of psychological possession where you literally start becoming a stranger to yourself. Think about the last time you met a woman who seemed absolutely perfect. Maybe she was incredibly beautiful. Maybe she was brilliant. Maybe she had this mysterious spiritual depth that made you feel like she understood the universe in ways you never could. What happened to you in her presence? Did you notice how your voice changed? How your opinions suddenly aligned with hers? How your entire personality seemed to reorganize itself around gaining her approval? This isn't love. This is anima projection, and it's one of the most destructive forces in masculine psychology. When you project your anima onto a perfect woman, you're essentially giving away your soul. You're saying, she is everything I'm not, everything I need, everything I should become. And in that moment, you stop being yourself and become a reflection of what you think she wants you to be. Jung observed this pattern repeatedly in his patients. Strong, successful men would come to him completely lost, describing how they felt like they were living someone else's life. They had molded themselves so completely around a woman's expectations that they could no longer recognize their own desires, their own values, their own authentic self. But what makes a woman perfect in the modern context? This is where things get truly sinister. We're living in an age of manufactured perfection. Social media curated lives, cosmetic enhancement, lifestyle branding, emotional intelligence weaponized for maximum psychological impact. The perfect woman today isn't just naturally beautiful or intelligent. She's a carefully constructed persona designed to trigger maximum psychological response in men. She's the Instagram influencer with flawless skin and perfectly messy hair, posting inspirational quotes about self-love while selling you the products that will make you worthy of her attention. She's the career woman who seems to effortlessly balance professional success with spiritual depth, making every man feel like he needs to level up just to deserve a conversation with her. She's the free-spirited artist who embodies everything authentic and creative that modern men feel they've lost in their corporate cubicles. She's the intellectual who can discuss philosophy and psychology with a depth that makes you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. And here's the most dangerous part. Some of these women genuinely are exceptional. They really are beautiful, intelligent, creative, and spiritually evolved. But that doesn't make the psychological dynamic any less destructive. In fact, it makes it worse because now you have a rational justification for your self-abandonment. You tell yourself, of course I should change for her. Look how amazing she is. Of course I should suppress my rough edges, my masculine directness, my sometimes crude sense of humor. Of course I should become more sensitive, more emotionally available, more spiritually evolved. She deserves the best version of me. But here's what Jung understood that most men don't. The best version of you isn't the version that perfectly complements her. The best version of you is the most authentic version of you. And authentic masculinity often includes qualities that don't fit neatly into feminine ideals of perfection. Jung wrote extensively about the importance of psychological wholeness. He believed that true psychological health required integrating all aspects of your personality, including the parts that might be considered dark, primitive, or socially unacceptable. He called these rejected aspects the shadow, and he warned that trying to become perfect for someone else would inevitably lead to shadow possession. When you suppress your authentic self to become worthy of a perfect woman, You don't eliminate those suppressed qualities. You just push them into your unconscious where they begin to operate autonomously. You might become passive-aggressive instead of directly confrontational. You might develop secret resentments instead of expressing honest disagreement. You might find yourself attracted to increasingly extreme forms of entertainment or fantasy as your psyche tries to compensate for the authenticity you've sacrificed. This is why so many men in relationships with perfect women report feeling empty, anxious, or secretly angry. They've created a false self that can maintain the relationship, but their true self is suffocating underneath. They've become strangers to themselves, and they don't even know how it happened. Jung also discovered something else crucial about anima projection. The qualities you see in your perfect woman aren't really about her at all. They're about the undeveloped aspects of your own psyche. When you're mesmerized by her emotional intelligence, you're really recognizing your own undeveloped emotional capacity. When you're captivated by her spiritual depth, you're really seeing your own unexplored spiritual potential. The tragedy is that instead of using this recognition to develop these qualities within yourself, you become dependent on her to provide them for you. You outsource your emotional development, your creative inspiration, your spiritual growth to another person, and that person, no matter how perfect she seems, can never truly give you what you need, because what you need is to become whole within yourself. This creates a terrible dynamic in the relationship. You become increasingly needy and dependent, while she becomes increasingly burdened by your projections. You expect her to be your muse, your therapist, your spiritual guide, your emotional regulator. You expect her to complete you in ways that no human being can complete another. And when she inevitably fails to live up to these impossible expectations, when she reveals herself to be human rather than divine, the projection collapses. But instead of recognizing that the problem was your projection, you often conclude that she wasn't the right woman after all, so you go searching for the next perfect woman, and the cycle begins again. Jung called this the eternal return of the same. Men who never learn to integrate their anima keep repeating the same pattern with different women, always searching for external completion instead of internal wholeness. They become addicted to the high of anima projection, the feeling of having found their missing piece, without ever realizing that the piece was never missing, it was just undeveloped within themselves. The most insidious aspect of this psychological trap is how it masquerades as spiritual evolution. Modern culture has convinced men that becoming more feminine, more emotionally available, more spiritually conscious is always positive growth. And while developing these qualities can indeed be valuable, when it comes at the expense of your authentic masculine nature, it becomes psychological self-destruction. Jung understood that healthy psychological development requires balance, not replacement. A psychologically healthy man doesn't abandon his masculine essence to become more feminine. He integrates feminine qualities while maintaining his masculine core. He develops emotional intelligence without losing his capacity for logical analysis. He cultivates spiritual awareness without sacrificing his grounded practicality. He learns to be vulnerable without becoming weak. But when you're under the spell of anima projection, you lose this balance completely. You don't integrate feminine qualities. You become possessed by them. You don't develop emotional intelligence. You become emotionally reactive. You don't cultivate spiritual awareness. You become spiritually pretentious. You don't learn vulnerability. You become psychologically dependent. This is why Jung emphasized the importance of what he called holding the tension of opposites. True psychological maturity requires the ability to contain contradictory qualities within yourself without resolving them into false simplicity. You can be both strong and sensitive, both logical and intuitive, both independent and connected. But this requires tremendous psychological strength and self-awareness. When you're possessed by anima projection, you lose this capacity for complexity. You become one-dimensional, molding yourself into whatever shape you think will please your perfect woman. You become a psychological chameleon, constantly shifting to match her energy, her interests, her values, her moods. And here's what's truly tragic about this dynamic. The woman you're trying so hard to please probably doesn't even want this version of you. Most psychologically healthy women are attracted to authentic masculinity, not to men who have abandoned their masculine nature in pursuit of feminine approval. They want a man who can stand in his own power while also being open to growth and connection. When you become a stranger to yourself in pursuit of her approval, you're not giving her what she actually wants. You're giving her what your wounded anima thinks she wants. You're projecting your own psychological needs onto her, and then trying to fulfill those projected needs. It's a closed loop of psychological confusion that serves no one. Jung also discovered that this pattern often stems from unresolved mother complex issues. Men who struggle with anima projection frequently had mothers who were either overly critical or overly idealized. If your mother was hypercritical, you might spend your life trying to find a woman who will finally approve of you. If your mother was idealized, you might spend your life trying to find a woman who measures up to that impossible standard. In either case, you're not really relating to the actual woman in front of you, you're relating to your internal mother imago. You're trying to heal childhood wounds through adult relationships, which never works because the wound isn't really about women at all. It's about your relationship with your own feminine nature. This is why Jung insisted that psychological healing had to happen from within. You can't heal your anima wounds by finding the perfect woman. You can only heal them by developing a conscious relationship with your own anima. This means learning to access your emotional intelligence, your intuitive wisdom, your creative inspiration, without needing a woman to provide these qualities for you. It means becoming comfortable with the feminine aspects of your own psyche without losing your masculine identity. It means developing what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to bridge conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, thinking and feeling within your own psychological system. But how do you know if you're caught in this trap? How do you recognize anima possession when it's happening to you? Jung identified several key symptoms. First, you find yourself constantly changing your opinions, interests, or behaviors to align with hers. Second, you feel like you can't be happy or complete without her presence or approval. Third, you start to lose touch with your own desires and goals, becoming increasingly focused on what she wants. Fourth, you begin to idealize her to an unrealistic degree, seeing her as somehow more evolved, more conscious, or more spiritually advanced than you are. Fifth, you start to feel anxious or depressed when she's not available, or when she seems displeased with you. And sixth, you notice that your male friendships and independent interests begin to fade as you become increasingly absorbed in the relationship. If you recognize these patterns in yourself, don't despair. Jung believed that anima possession was actually a necessary stage in masculine psychological development, as long as you eventually learn to recognize it and move beyond it. The key is developing what he called anima consciousness, the ability to relate to feminine energy without being possessed by it. This requires several crucial steps. First, you must learn to recognize your projections as projections. When you find yourself thinking that a woman is perfect, ask yourself what qualities you're seeing in her that you haven't developed in yourself. What is she providing for you that you could learn to provide for yourself? Second, you must begin the work of anima integration. This means consciously developing your emotional intelligence, your creative capacity, your intuitive wisdom, your spiritual awareness, not to please a woman, but to become a more complete human being. Jung recommended practices like dream work, active imagination, artistic expression, and deep psychological reflection. Third, you must learn to maintain your masculine center while remaining open to feminine influence. This means staying grounded in your own values, goals, and identity, while also being genuinely curious about and responsive to feminine perspectives. It means being able to say no when necessary, while also being willing to grow and change when appropriate. Fourth, you must develop what Jung called a conscious relationship with your shadow. All those aspects of yourself that you've been suppressing to become worthy of feminine approval need to be acknowledged and integrated. Your aggression, your competitiveness, your sexual desires, your need for independence, your sometimes crude humor. These aren't flaws to be eliminated. They're aspects of your authentic self that need to be consciously expressed in healthy ways. Fifth, you must learn to see women as complete human beings rather than as anima projections. This means recognizing that even the most exceptional woman has flaws, struggles, and areas where she's still growing. It means appreciating her genuine qualities without idealizing her beyond human proportions. It means relating to her as an equal rather than as a goddess or a savior. Jung also emphasized the importance of what he called the individuation process, the lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are, rather than who others expect you to be. This process requires tremendous courage because it means standing alone with your authentic self, even when that self doesn't fit social expectations or feminine ideals. But here's what Jung discovered about men who successfully navigate this process. They become far more attractive to psychologically healthy women than men who remain caught in anima projection. Authentic masculinity, masculinity that has integrated feminine qualities without being possessed by them, is magnetic in a way that false perfection never can be. When you know who you are and you're comfortable with your complete self, including your shadow aspects, you radiate a kind of psychological stability that draws people to you. You're no longer desperately seeking completion from others because you've found wholeness within yourself. You're no longer trying to prove your worth because you've accepted your inherent value. This doesn't mean you stop growing or that you become rigid and unchanging. It means you grow from a place of strength rather than from a place of deficiency. You change because you choose to evolve, not because you're trying to become worthy of someone else's love. Jung believed that this kind of psychological maturity was essential not just for individual happiness, but for the health of society as a whole. When men remain caught in anima projection, they create relationships based on psychological dependency rather than genuine partnership. They raise children who inherit their same psychological wounds. They contribute to a culture that confuses authentic growth with people-pleasing. But when men learn to integrate their anima consciously, they become capable of what Jung called conjunctio, the sacred marriage between masculine and feminine within the individual psyche. They become whole human beings who can offer genuine love rather than neurotic need. They become fathers who can model healthy masculinity for their sons and healthy relationships for their daughters. So if you've been chasing perfect women, if you've been losing yourself in relationships, if you've been feeling like a stranger to your own authentic nature, understand that this is not a character flaw. It's a stage in your psychological development. The question is whether you'll remain stuck in this stage or whether you'll use it as a catalyst for genuine growth. The path forward requires courage, honesty, and commitment to your own psychological development. It requires giving up the fantasy that someone else can complete you and accepting the responsibility of completing yourself. It requires facing your shadow, integrating your anima, and standing in your authentic masculine power. But the reward is immense. When you no longer need a perfect woman to feel complete, you become capable of loving an imperfect woman completely. When you're no longer a stranger to yourself, you can offer your authentic self to another. When you've integrated your own feminine nature, you can appreciate feminine energy without being possessed by it. This is the path that Jung mapped out for masculine psychological development. It's not easy, but it's the only path that leads to genuine wholeness and authentic love. The perfect woman isn't out there waiting to complete you. The complete man is in here waiting to be discovered, integrated, and expressed. Your journey toward psychological wholeness starts with recognizing the trap you've been caught in and making the conscious choice to step out of it. It starts with the courage to be yourself, even when that self doesn't match anyone else's definition of perfection. Are you ready to stop being a stranger to yourself? Are you ready to reclaim your authentic masculine nature while consciously integrating your feminine aspects? Are you ready to love from wholeness rather than from need? The choice is yours, and the time is now.